joining us today for this very important, crucial discussion on addiction treatment. And thank you as well, Susan Sarandon and Senator Nina Turner, for joining us as well. My name is Will, and I'm an organizer with the Bernie campaign here in Manchester. I have the distinct pleasure and honor of, galvanizing voters here and helping us knock on doors, make phone calls, and ultimately turning out folks to the polls come February 11th, primary day. So we're here specifically for the topic on the opioids crisis. What is that? It's a story we hear all too often. It's someone who breaks their arm. They're just unlucky, maybe during football practice, they fell on their arm the wrong way, and they have to go to the hospital. They get a cast, their doctor prescribes them a medication for their pain, and little do they know, that medication is highly addictive. And they start building a tolerance to that medication. So higher and higher doses are needed to achieve that same effect. And they keep taking that drug, and eventually there's that one dose that goes too far. These stories are all too common, and oftentimes they're due to the marketing practices of pharmaceutical companies, misleading doctors, misleading patients about the true addictive properties of those drugs. So, we need a government that treats these stories as a matter of public health, not as a matter of crime. We need a government that guarantees addiction treatment to everyone, and not just for those who can afford it, or for those who have the adequate services provided by their city that's local to them. So I'm here because I truly believe Bernie is the candidate who can get us towards those goals. Medicare for All guarantees addiction treatment to everyone as part of their health guarantee as a human right. And he wants to hold pharmaceutical companies and executives criminally accountable as well if they engage in illegal marketing practices with these drugs. So I'm truly inspired by Bernie's commitment to ending this crisis. Another awesome fact about Medicare for All that I just love is that prescription drug costs would be capped at $200 per individual as well, per year. That I think would help out a lot of folks who are dependent on so many, life-saving drugs. So now I have the distinct honor of welcoming Senator Nina Turner to our discussion here. She's a former state senator from Ohio. She has been at the helm of our revolution, and it's always a pleasure to hear you speak, Senator. And I look forward to hearing you on this crucial matter today.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone, and it's great to be here with you today at this facility that is really doing a yeoman's job to make sure that our sisters and brothers who are in need get the help that they so rightfully deserve. As was mentioned earlier, addiction should not be treated like a crime. It is a health crisis, and especially when that crisis comes at the hands of doctors that prescribe certain medications. And I do totally agree that some of those doctors may not have known how potent it was and how you kind of like chasing that high, so to speak, to make the pain go away. In this country, we criminalize drug usage, whether it's prescription drugs or otherwise. No other industrialized nation treats drug addiction in the way that we do. We can go so much further as a nation if we invest those same dollars on the health side. And so that is why the Medicare for All, the comprehensive nature of Medicare for All that the senator is proposing, and how he comes at these very deep-seated issues. My state of Ohio, the same thing. Opioid addiction is a really big crisis in the state of Ohio as well. It has taken hold all over this country. I think some experts call the drug epidemics that we have, that we're seeing crop up over this across the country, as that of desperation too. Yeah. Because people are hurting so much and you just want to escape. So whether it's your physical pain or mental pain, you are seeking a way to escape. And that should never be the case. Too many people are hurt and sad and broken in this nation. And that is why not only do we need Medicare for All, we need a healing to come across this nation, because whether you are somebody or you love somebody who has an addiction, other factors in our universe are triggering us in ways that we have not seen in quite some time. And so all of those issues, the confluence of those issues, have to be dealt with in a very comprehensive way, from the federal government all the way to the local government, and also in spaces like this where you have even the religious community can do a lot to be helpful in that regard, as we seek to understand in ways that are beyond our understanding how we can come together and make good on the promise that everybody deserves to live a good life. Not a decent life, not a halfway life, a good life. And nobody seeks to be drug addicted. Nobody seeks to be miserable. So it is something about the human condition, and it just as despair is in the human condition, uplift is in the human condition, hope is in the human condition, vision is in the human condition. And if we turn this around using the power of government coupled with the power of us as just everyday ordinary citizens, we can do so much good in the world. I truly, truly believe that. So it is an honor for myself and Susan to be here with our colleagues, your colleagues, and people who have firsthand knowledge about this crisis right here in this state. So what I'm going to do, because I want to get Ms. Murray. Did I get that right? Is that? Oh,
I think I'm going to close those tabs.
Oh, you're closed? Yeah. Oh, they changed the order on me. Okay, I was wondering. Okay, so with that, I want to turn it on. I'm looking at my notes, but we will just roll with the change. So I'm so glad to have my sister, Susan Sarandon, here. Many of you know her. You know her work, both on film and television, but she's an activist too. And it's such a beautiful thing to have someone like her of her stature use that stature for good. She can simply do TV and big screen and all the other things that she does, but she does activism. She has been arrested. She is on the front line. She walks the walk. She doesn't just talk the talk. And she has a compassion and a heart of gold. I think a lot of it has to do with her being the oldest of 9 children, because I'm the oldest of 7. Or the oldest knows how to take over and make things happen. We were on the front lines for Senator Sanders, as you all know, in 2016, and we find ourselves right back on assignment in 2020, and it being even more important now than it was in 2016. It was very important in 2016. It is definitely important right now that we make sure we do everything that we can to make sure that Senator Bernie Sanders becomes the 46th president of the United States.
Yes.
Amen.
Well, thank you all for having us. You know, I'm here because I can just be a little light every now and then to, with the media, give a little information. I don't pretend to be an expert, but I can go back firsthand and say, I've heard your stories, I've heard your conversations. I've been in Ohio, I've been in Iowa, and I've talked to people there that have lost people because of this crisis, or people who are struggling with addiction. And so I know in those states what's been going on. New Hampshire is so beautiful. I was stunned to find out how deep the problem is here. You know, it's just, I'm an Eastern Coast person. I grew up in New York and New Jersey, and have a place in Maine that my dad retired to and that we've been going to forever. We camped in New Hampshire. So this is my coast. I've never left this coast. And so I was happy to take the train here and just to see what's going on, because I feel that we're at such a critical moment now when the whole system could completely change for the best with Senator Sanders.
Yes.
And that is very encouraging to me. This is a moment in history where we'll look back and we'll say, what did you do? Because this is where it all goes one way or it all goes the other way, because we cannot have a middle of the road thing happening. Even, you know, this idea that anybody but Trump isn't going to be enough. We really need systemic change. And so I'm curious to know, I know that this problem snuck up on everybody, you know, and it took a lot of education to realize how methodically this problem was created by the greed of the pharmaceutical companies. So I'm curious to know if now we have gotten to a point where at least people are more cautious, and doctors know they can't give this kind of medication just for anything, and I don't know where we are with that, so I'm here to really listen and to be encouraging and to say that I'm doing everything I can to get Medicare for all because of this kind of crisis. I have a brother who has all kinds of issues physically now because he was a heroin addict for many years. And so I know his struggles. I know his struggles just mentally, you know, even now that he's just got a new liver. He's been, you know, struggling with a lot of things that have a lot of health challenges that he has because of his days as an addict. So that even now that he's clean, he still is struggling. And he couldn't have, I mean, I help him as much as I can, but, you know, some of the things that he's been through would have wiped me out if he hadn't had some, you know, he's on, you know, he makes so little money that he's had some help, and he is kind of an isolated person. Anyway, without getting into my brother's story, just to say that really, if it wasn't for the insurance that he has and some of the insurance that I've got for him, I would be bankrupt because he's had so many health problems. So I know how those things are linked, and how families suffer not only from the physical challenges but the financial challenges, and then the lack of support. Once you have become clean, where do you go? How do you deal with all that? So it's a complicated and pressing and really important thing to deal with. So I'm happy to be here and to just hear your stories and be able to go back with a more educated overall picture of what is going on now, and hearing from you guys and from all the experts. So thank you for inviting me to this place.
All right, I have Jody.
That's me.
All right.
So my name is Jody. I live in Keene now, but I'm originally from Boston, just south of Boston, Weymouth. We're close enough that people actually know when I'm out in California. I have to say Boston because nobody knows where Weymouth is. Anyway, 2008, Christmas Eve, my fiance at the time and the father of my two children overdosed on heroin in our back. I was 9 months pregnant at the time. Had our youngest 3 weeks later. Our oldest was 13 months old, or at the time just over a year. Corey, our oldest was about 3 months old when we realized that Corey had this issue. And the way that we realized that Corey had substance use issues is because he was pulled over by the state police. They found heroin and some OxyContin in his car. Eight OxyContin he had already consumed at that point. We had no idea that this was going on. Obviously, you're like, what is going on? People are, he's acting strange or things like that, and not in my wildest dreams would I ever have thought that he was doing heroin. It just didn't even cross my mind. I wasn't familiar enough to know the signs or anything like that. So we found out at the same time as the criminal justice system found out. Because of what he had in the car, he was facing a 10-year mandatory minimum. So at the same time, as we're trying to navigate this recovery and as a family be supportive of him and all this stuff, he was also dealing with this impending mandatory minimum. Now, mind you, we have a baby, and then we have another one on the way. So all I can think about is that first phone call. I used to call Corey my big, strong, handsome man. That was what I called him. He was a big, strong, handsome man. And he was my protector, my rock. And to get that phone call from the state police barracks, him in custody, and just to hear this broken down voice, this man who was my rock and my protector, kind of reduced to this self-loathing, humiliated individual, just to hear his voice in that moment was shocking to me. I mean, first of all, we didn't know that he was doing heroin, so at that time it was a shock to find that out. But to hear just that pitiful voice, you know. The next day we picked him up from the police station, and his whole family and I. And when we kind of broke away and Corey and I went to walk to our car, he literally collapsed into a ball. And with one of my hands held in both of his, asked me to forgive him. I mean, I don't know how to express that properly. Just the difference between someone who is confident and who is determined, who is self-educated, who is this man who is going to take care of me for the rest of my life, reduced to a ball on the curb, is, anyway. And that was essentially how the next 9 months went, where he was humiliated. Anyway, so 9 months later, he passed away. And I think really the more significant thing that I'd really like to talk about today is that I have 2 children. You know, so when we talk about this war on drugs, we don't realize that what we're talking about is a war on people. We're talking about a war on our family members, a war on our community members. This is a war on people. The casualties of this war are the people, okay? The unintended consequences are my children growing up, knowing this experience, knowing this loss, knowing this humiliation because of the stigma that, while it has improved, and I think people have started to understand, is still in this criminal context of someone who is unworthy of respect and dignity, who is not treated with compassion, is treated with disdain. Mm-hmm. And so, anyway, just to kind of wrap things up, what I think I bring to this conversation is understanding how it affects other people in this situation. And I think in New Hampshire, we all know, we all have someone in our life who has gone through this. We all understand that feeling. Now think about it from a child's mind. When my son was about 5 years old, my youngest, who never got to know his dad, right? So when he was about 5 years old, he started making up stories about his dad and things that he had done with his dad. Now, of course, me, for one thing, trying to deal with my own grief, and then also trying to kind of preempt this stigma in the way that it would affect my children, I told them all these stories. I wanted my kids to know not only that they were, that he was a good person, but that they were created in love, and that he loved them so unbelievably much. And so I wanted to tell my kids all of these stories. I spent 5 years telling my kids all of these stories, and then my son starts telling these stories, and what does that indicate to you? I mean, I guess it's a small thing maybe for other people, but to me as a mother, I'm listening to this and I'm thinking, he's trying to forge some connection with his dad. He's trying to figure out where he fits in this, because he wasn't in any of the family pictures that we had with his older brother. He wasn't in any of these stories, so he's trying to place himself in it. I think not only do we overlook the way that we frame this issue and the effect that it has on the people who are struggling and trying to deal with it, but it has lots of effects on other people who are involved in it and who are left afterwards. And I think that's something that we need to keep in mind. Also, throughout this process, I've talked to so many people, and I've met so many people who have actually recovered. And I just think, people, I met this one guy at a conference who was talking about, for 15 years, every morning he was out on the street and his first thing was, where am I going to get my next fix? You know what that man has been doing? For 10 years now, he's been speaking out, he's been helping people on the streets, he's been going out trying to get services for people and medical assisted treatment and all these kind of things. This is an amazing person who is trying to do amazing things for other people. And what that means to me, not only him, but so many other people, is that we need to keep people alive. We need to do whatever we possibly can to keep people alive. So, yeah, I guess that's...
Me in tears.
How old are your kids now?
11 and 12. My son actually, my youngest who I was talking about, just celebrated his 11th birthday yesterday.
Congratulations.
Yeah. Thank you. I mean, Jody put a lot of heaviness in the space, and I want us to rest with it for a minute. She talked about dignity. I could picture her fiance as she was describing him, and I could picture the curve and seeing her big handsome man curled up in the ball. And she's right, nobody should be reduced to that. The whole notion of dignity, that every life matters. It is unfortunate that in this country, that materialism, commercialism, all of these things are more important to us in this country than the sanctity of life. We're always trying to chase the Joneses. So in many ways, everybody's trying to chase some kind of high. And it's just the way that we've been socialized in this country to give more love and respect to people who have the most in terms of material things. And then if you don't have a lot materially, your life really doesn't matter. Because if her fiance was somebody from a wealthy family, well-to-do family, he would have had what he needed to live, to survive, to get a do-over. And so we do need a paradigm shift in this country that is bigger than having Medicare for all. We need a paradigm shift in this country where we change the dynamic, we change the script, so to speak. And government can't do that for us. We have to determine that we're going to do this for ourselves. And I think social media has a lot to do with the craziness that's going on, where that is seen as real life. So Jody, we all thank you for sharing that story. I mean, it was just really powerful in the frame. That it keeps playing in my mind. It makes me think of a quote by Albert Einstein. I don't know if this is verbatim, but he said, poisonous weeds and corn can grow in the same soil if the conditions are right. I believe that the conditions matter more than the soil. And that is what Jody laid out, that the conditions matter. And we got to change the conditions in this country. And that's really why Senator Sanders is calling out the greed of folks and saying that we deserve better in this country because we need different conditions. So, Sister Jody, thank you for sharing that with us. I'm just all messed up right now. We have Philip.
Thank you. I'm Phil Spaniolo. I'm a person in long-term recovery. I joined this fight a little over 4 years ago. I got out of jail. I had nothing. I was a heroin addict. I had become a heroin addict in my 40s, had never done opiates. I started with Oxycontin when it came out and had been prescribed to me. And I'd struggled with substances before that, so I'm not going to say that the reason I became a heroin addict is because I tried Oxycontin. But it certainly escalated the fact. But I ended up in jail because of drugs. I was mostly a functioning addict for most of my life, and held jobs and tried to hide it as best I could. But once I became an opiate addict, I couldn't hide it anymore. At the time, I owned a restaurant with my brother-in-law, who was a computer engineering guy, graduated from Wentworth. We had another friend who owned a car dealership. All three of us tried Oxycontin that day, and eventually all three of us ended up in jail or prison. So I got out, And I started to ask for help. I started to seek services. I kept having doors closed in my face. I kept, getting the runaround. I would have to bring paperwork, the same paperwork 3 times to DHHS before I could even get some help. And I was frustrated. And one day it just dawned on me, like, I'm a hard-headed, stubborn, motivated man, and I'm ready to give up. What about the rest of the people? What about the people that can't speak up for themselves? What about the people that don't have the determination that I have? What happens to them? So I started to ask questions, and I went to the mayor of my town, and I demanded answers from him, and I got none. And so I continued to look, and I got involved with some people that had opened or started a nonprofit, and they were trying to open up a recovery center like this in my area. And for the first time in my life, I felt like I had a sense of purpose, right? These people respected my opinion. The guy that just got out of jail that was a heroin addict, like my story mattered to them. And we were able to open up a recovery center, and we were able to start helping people. And then I realized how difficult it was to get these people help, right?
Yeah.
So we have this system that is set up to get people help that doesn't exist. And so every day I would be banging my head against the wall. People would come to me, they were desperate, they were going to die if they didn't get help. And they were being told they have to come back in 4 weeks to get into a treatment facility, right? Right now, if you call treatment facilities in New Hampshire, that is what you will be told. 4 to 6 weeks to get into treatment.
Yeah.
We just spent more money dropping bombs on Soleimani in Iraq, right, than we're willing to spend on and saving people's lives in this country, right? So then I started to demand answers from our local politicians, and I was, during the process of opening the recovery center, there was a state senator involved, and I started getting so angry. He's like, go down to Concord and start testifying. So I started doing that, and I saw the deaf ears that it was falling on. So I'd come back and I'd complain to him. He said, listen, man, you can't complain if you don't want to do something about it. He's like, run for office.
Yeah.
So I'm 2 years out of prison, recovering heroin addict, and this guy wants me to run for office. And I'm like, man, you got to be crazy. Who's going to vote for me, right? But a special election came up for the House of Representatives in New Hampshire, and I ran for office. And what I found by knocking on people's doors, by now people knew me as a recovering addict, I was very vocal about that. They knew the work that I was doing in the community. They would pull me into their living room and they would tell me about their relative, their husband, their son, their daughter, their grandchild, right? And we would have these real conversations about how this was affecting them. Grandparents who had to go back to work because they had to raise their grandchildren, right? And so I had these real conversations. I ended up winning that election and went on to serve 2 years out of, almost to the day, 2 years out of jail. I was sworn in as a state representative. One of the things that I've learned, and one of the reasons that I love Bernie, is that I realized that if you want to do bigger things, if you want to help more people, you have to get involved in the process. This has to be structural change, like we talked about, right? This is not one person standing up there. If I could stand in the street all day long or on the rooftops all day long and scream about this problem, but I can't affect change unless I'm involved in the process. So now I'm running for state senator because I know that I can make more change if I get elected to the Senate. And this is we have these superficial systems in place that claim to help people that really don't, right? We haven't fully invested. This is a problem that needs to be handled comprehensively. I would venture to guess that 80% of the people that have substance use disorder have some sort of either mental health issue, trauma issue, PTSD issue, all of those things. So what we have decided to do is treat the symptom rather than the problem, right? So like I go back to the book Prozac Nation, right? Like what were we doing? We're treating the symptoms, we're not treating the underlying issues. Until I treated my underlying issues, I couldn't stay sober, right? Until I had a sense of purpose and felt like my life mattered, I couldn't stay sober, right? Now that I'm involved in the process and I'm out there in this, I own sober houses for men. I work in the community to get people treatment when I can, right? I do all of these things because I know that if I don't, it's gonna, like you said, we need the government to step in and give us some money and set up some structural change that's going to this. But this really falls on everybody to get involved.
Just for the record. And I just wanted to touch on the Sackler comment real quick before I get into my story and these other points. How they and their associates plan to profit off both sides after getting people addicted and overprescribing and all that. And that's just, you know, that plan that they had is being done in many different ways, and it's population control, 100%. There's multiple different levels of that, and this drug war is a war of flooding the streets with drugs, profiting off both sides of it, and then now they want to give the death penalty to drug dealers who might cause a death. Well, what about the death penalty for these individuals on these pharmaceutical companies that caused all these deaths? So, that said, my name is Footloose. My story in brief as possible. I was a homeless runaway teen. I ended up getting into drugs to, you know, sell and make money and have a house to live in or an apartment or couch surf or wherever. And that led to eventually to pills and heroin. I went in and out of the juvenile justice system. Eventually did a 6-year state prison sentence. Then I went back, and at the beginning of, which was going to be another 5-year term in solitary confinement, I realized that my problem and everyone else's problem that can't get recovered is housing. Safe, stable housing, okay? And this is, you know, easy to prove. We look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs pyramid, which is a scientific thing to achieve self-actualization is the top of the pyramid, which is the epitome of recovery, being recovered and doing great, better things with your life and achieving more. That is not possible without the base of the pyramid, which is the basic needs being met. So we hear about why some people can recover faster than others and some people can't. Well, some people have a lot of support, financial support from family and friends and so on and so forth, and some don't. And they're left cycling in and out of treatment centers, using them as housing, going back, being told by the doorway they need to piss dirty to get help. So they go and they get high and they, you know, go on. It's insane. And it's a revolving door of billing people's insurance and not even providing them any services whatsoever, you know. And the other revolving door is the religious-based programming, which violates our First Amendment rights, okay? It violates our First Amendment rights. And where does the shame and stigma come from? It comes from the language: addict, alcoholic, druggie, junkie, so on and so forth. We don't use those slogans in Smart Recovery. There is no shame and no stigma in Smart Recovery. We are a secular option, okay? We're a viable secular option that is, in my opinion, the best kept secret of recovery. All they said, 12 steps works, 12 steps works. Well, their studies show, you know, the best one is like 5%. Spontaneous remission is 15%. That's spontaneous remission is people getting better without any program, without SMART, without 12 steps, none of it. So if it goes from 15 without anything to 5, where there is, where does the shame and stigma come from? The language, where did the language come from? It comes from the 12-step program, okay? And another slogan of theirs, which I love, is principles over personalities. Principles over personalities in politics and recovery. And somehow I got involved in volunteering in recovery, and it turned into this great big political nightmare. Okay? 100% politics in recovery, and it's businesses trying to suck up all the funding is what it is. So you got these zero tolerance houses that are kicking people out for confirming their diagnosis, kicking them out for coming home late, kicking them out for violating whatever zero tolerance rule they have. And how many people do they kick out in a week? I don't know. The doorway would have to check those numbers, but it's reasonable to think 5 people a week are easily getting kicked out. They suck, that's $2,000, so they're incentivized
Yeah.
to kick people out and keep this revolving door going and not provide any services at these houses and not give them anything viable, give them tools to work with, like we have at Smart Recovery. So, boom, boom, let me check these off. I paroled in 2015 to a specialty shelter here in the city called Helping Hands, right? Met a wonderful gentleman named Chuck Novak. He was my case manager. He's the New Hampshire-Vermont regional coordinator for Smart Recovery. He said, hey, come down to this Hope Center down on Market Street there. It was a tiny little place. The whole place was about this big, right? The whole center at that time. They had a small little meeting room off in the side. We had 1 or 2 Smart Recovery meetings. I had to volunteer to cover my program fees to keep a roof over my head. So I had to do 20 hours a week of volunteering. And as I got more involved, I enjoyed what I was doing. I liked it, and I was good at it. So I made a little bit of name for myself, eventually got hired at Amber's Place Crisis Respite, worked there till it closed, passed that off to Serenity Place, which got shut down for a great big, insurance billing scheme that we haven't heard about ever since. Okay? So, it's really frustrating, all these different things that I've seen. I worked at Manchester Mental Health for a time. It was a wonderful experience on the ACT team and Mobile Crisis Response team. I learned a lot. I eventually left there, and then I collected unemployment for a little bit and decided to try to open my own sober house. I was letting people couch surf, and it wasn't anything, serious. And I eventually came up with an entire program structure and developed the first Smart Recovery-based transitional living program in the country, probably in the world, but definitely here in the state of New Hampshire. There's nowhere else. And LA is the only other place you can find Smart Recovery housing. So we're providing the only secular option. There's 3 levels that people work through. We incentivize them to participate. We teach them the tools. And we have successful drug court clients. We work with probation and parole directly. But we're blacklisted by the community. And we're blackballed. And we can't receive any scholarship funding from the doorway because we're not on the voluntary sober house registry. If we're not on that registry, because we're boycotting it, because we are not a sober house. We're nothing like any of these houses in the area. Okay? And they don't want to accept that. They think we're just going to go away and we're going to fall down. But we're getting stronger, and we're reaching out to the community. When our clients that want to come in the house are denied by the doorway, we'll do a personal fundraiser, and we get that in 24 hours. Very innovative thing we developed is a second chance policy to destroy that revolving door. We work with people through a potential slip up. We give them 2 weeks. There's increased observation. If they come up with another dirty urine, they're gone. No third chances. But we're willing to work with people if they do have a slip up, because Smart Recovery principles say that a slip up is a learning opportunity. We can see why it happened. What were the thoughts that got us to do it, right? So we need housing first programs, which is basically what we are. Housing first, like the bottom of the pyramid needs to be there. We know that we have the homelessness problem is tied right into this and in all the drug use and everything, right? And the main difference between, our program and some of these other programs is we are a self-empowerment program. That's what it's all about. It's about learning the tools. We don't have buddies. We don't have sponsors. People learn the tools, apply them to their life, and then they get better. And they can be recovered. There's 6 stages in the stages of change, but everybody that comes to my meetings, they only know about 5. They're taught 5 stages in the stages of change and treatment. Because the 6th one, sorry, my alarm's going off. The 6th one is the exit stage, the graduation stage, and they
Yeah.
want people to think you're an addict, you're addicted, you have to identify as that, and then you're so much more than that. We're people, we're brothers, we're sisters, mothers, fathers, sons, daughters, you know, maybe we're, I gotta turn this off, sorry. You know, artists or something like that. Sorry about that. So, that's what this program is about, Principles Over Personalities. Yeah, the religious programming hinges on the, and then what about tent cities and camps?
Yeah.
We kick all these homeless people out of the park and strew them all over the city streets, all over Elm Street, sleeping in doorways of businesses, and people are complaining, and it is bad for business. Why can't we just cordon off the tent cities and have staffed people from DHHS and whoever, Manchester Mental Health, can be there and get these people to the programming that they need, right? Basic income for all is a very important piece of this puzzle. It will incentivize the development of affordable housing. To touch on the MAT thing, it needs to be, it's supposed to be a taper, an immediate 3-month taper when someone's doing Suboxone or this or that. You put them on a high dose and start tapering. What are they doing? Increase, and keeping them on for 5-10 years, which only causes more nutrition deficiencies and anxiety and from that.
Yeah.
Another thing that's causing overdoses is Vivitrol. Not because they're trying to break through it to get high, because the rewiring of your neurobiology causes you to have a lower tolerance. They're being sued right now for not informing their patients and clients about that. So people get out and they're like, oh, I'll do a tiny amount, and then they do it and they don't know that their brain's been rewired and boom, they're done. You know, it's disgusting. An idea that I have about being able to track these illicit things, good? Yeah, okay, thank you.
I hear you. It's amazing that you're so organized in your thoughts, and I totally agree. There've been so many.
Smart recovery.
Yeah, well, you've done a good job.
Politicians need
Yeah.
some smart recovery.
But I know the programs where housing is given without any tests ahead of time, that they have a very, very high, I don't know what you call it, recovery rate or whatever, like in the 90s. Instead of making people earn it, whatever, when people feel safe, when a person has somewhere to relax, it takes away so much of the tension and anxiety and gives you dignity and gives you a sense of self, and it is very important. And I agree with you about the housing first thing. And I think it still goes back to, you know, when you're talking about these programs, people want to